Hi guys, and welcome back to episode, I think it's episode 4 now of the You're Hired podcast. I've got a very special guest with me. I think we've known each other for around about a year now, I think. And definitely, like I say, I had multiple conversations. Federico, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I guess for I obviously know who you are. I guess for people that maybe don't know who you are, do you mind sort of giving a bit of a background into what it is that your story is and maybe what it is that you're currently doing now?
Sure. I'm a software engineer. Right now, I'm a manager, but I always like to say that I'm a software engineer because I like coding at the end of the day. So, sorry, not sorry. I'm from Uruguay in South America, but I've been living in multiple countries. I lived in the US, obviously my home country. I live in Germany, and right now I'm living, and hopefully the last stop, in Spain. Not because of anything bad about the previous one. It's just it was funny to travel a lot, but now I want to stay in one place.
Yeah, especially as you get a bit older, you kind of want to maybe not move around so much. You want to kind of stick where
Unfortunately, you get old and you get bored. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So you've clearly done a lot of traveling, and I suppose this can kind of go on to our first topic, really. I think that this is really quite interesting. I think from my perspective as well as a tech recruiter, I'm more just fixated into the German market, specifically a lot of focus in Berlin as well. And so my kind of, I guess, my knowledge doesn't really span outside of that. Whereas your knowledge is across the world, it seems. You know, you've been, you say, from Latin America, from North America, to Germany for a bit as well, which is where we obviously was connected, and now to Spain. What would you say would be the difference being a software engineer as opposed to the three other places that I mentioned, then to sort of being a software engineer in Germany?
I need to start saying that I had higher expectations because of the famous statement that Berlin is the tech hub of almost Europe. So I had really high expectations. It's impossible not to compare that it's the tech hub of Europe to San Francisco. At least for me, like I had the same high level expectations, and having been in both places and seeing the environment in both places, it's like, oof, this is a complete different thing.
Really?
But I believe it was more like different, like wrong expectations on my side. I see that Europe is way more conservative. You can clearly see that with GDPR and a lot of regulations. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just different. In the US, you do whatever you want. The focus is like produce, take risk, make things happen, and fake it until you make it is the most famous phrase in the US. In Europe, complete different thing. I was in Y Combinator, networking with some people, and I met a really interesting guy from Switzerland that he was just there to try to understand why US market was so risk taking, and why in Europe you need to first have a really strong case, and first you need to prove things. And when I arrived to Berlin and I saw the market, it was like everything makes sense. People is more risk adverse. That doesn't mean that there are no results and that is wrong or worst. It's just different. Different approach for solving the same problem. But at the end of the day, you see a lot of companies appearing, and usually they get different backup from investment, different request. And in the US, I see that you have more volume of companies appearing, but also a lot of them fail. In Europe, you don't have such a big volume of companies, but when you start seeing some companies, like they usually like figure it out at some point.
Do you think that is the reason? Because I'm fascinated by that, by the way, that the kind of failure rate in the US, in North America, compared to Europe is of course much higher, but probably because they are increasing the quantity, the volume of organizations and companies that create. Do you think that failure over there is seen differently as opposed to Europe? Because I know from living in Europe, and of course being from the UK, if you was to start a company, the first thing that people say is startup, especially in tech or whatnot, the first thing people say, even people in your family, whatnot, they'll say, "Oh my God, what are you doing? That's an incredibly high risk." It's just basically don't do that at all. Whereas it looks like it's almost encouraged in the US.
No, in the US it's completely different. Like anyone can be an entrepreneur. The fake it until you make it is crazy. In some cases, I mean, in some cases is extremely wrong. But I mean, the culture is more like take the risk, be convinced, commit, and sooner or later, if you are honestly committed about that and you find good coaching, you will figure it out. The reality is that it's a really lovely and nice setup and pitch, but it misses some regulations to prevent people doing wrong things.
Right.
That in Europe, you have the setup. So if you're doing something wrong or something that may be illegal, or like the entry point in Europe is a bit more difficult. In the US, anyone can do it. And the economy is way more crazy with less regulations. So if you do it wrong, you will find a different way. In Europe, like the consequences of doing it wrong may be extremely expensive.
Do you think that there's a lot of stress for software engineers in US because of that whole high volatility, high turnover? Is that very distracting from a software engineering perspective?
Depending on the seniority level, but yeah, I mean, for a more senior position or if you want to grow, yes, the level of pressure and the creation of the product engineering role that it's starting to be more like a common thing right now in some places is kind of the way of pushing engineers to be more focused also on the business, because they need it. They need engineering and they need tech to deliver more value, because they committed to more things, rather than in Europe that you have a better like shove and working policies, like working overtime and lifetime balance in Europe. It's awesome. You stay late or you need to really break your leg if you are in certain like small areas like finance. That is a bit crazy, but in general, you have your life, you have your time. 6 o'clock, you go home if you went early. But in the US, like there is no schedule. Like you need to do what you need to do, and if you need to do 12 hours, you need to do 12 hours. And for me, the more clear indicator is like try to compare vacation policies in both places. In the US, the minimum is 4, 5, 7 days. That's crazy.
Yeah, and over in Germany, it could go up to 30, but really it's like around 25, which is significantly better, right? Like you say,
Definitely.
It's pretty much 5 times better, which again, that's quite damaging as well, I guess, from a worker's perspective. If you're a software engineer, software engineering is no joke, right? It's a lot of stress. Depends, of course, on what organization, so many factors, but most of the teams that they'll be joining is maybe startups, and that is high pressure, high stress. There's things that happen all of the times that go wrong. And so the fact that they have no real vacation days is crazy to me, right? It's insane.
Yeah.
And so many people that have moved away, by the way, from the US just because of that to Berlin, just because purely vacation days is just non-existent. I guess it kind of, again, brings me quite nicely onto the next part, which I mentioned just a little bit earlier about startups. For me, I work with a lot of startups, right? And they operate in a completely different way. And I want to know your perspective, because there's kind of an argument at the moment between, if you're just starting out, maybe just had your degree in computer science and you want to find your first job, would you recommend a startup as your first job? or would you recommend a place that has maybe more structure, bigger organization?
That's a really interesting question. I think that at the end of, I have a strong personal opinion, obviously based on my biases and what I like on my career.
Yeah.
But if I need to be respectful and give a good advice to people, like my answer will be depends. There is some people that is more risk adverse and want to grow and want to learn and want to take it easy, but really learn. For those people, I would say like go to a startup for some time. You are going to do a lot of different things. You are going to be exposed to a lot of problems. Like my personal belief is that between your 20s and your 30s, you need to learn. So you need to make mistakes and learn from them. My approach was I went to multiple companies, saw different businesses in different regions, in different countries, with different people. So now I know a lot of setups. I know a lot of examples. That's sometimes gives the feeling that I know a lot of things, but it's not that I'm extremely wise. I just made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And saw a lot of cases. So
embrace the mistakes, kind of like the US culture, really, really embrace it. See it as a win.
In some cases, it's like, I'm not smart. I was just stupid 2 years ago and made that mistake. So now I don't want to repeat it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there is kind of no yes or no. Like you said, it just depends, right?
But for some people that is more structured and want to have a more like, tell me what to do, and I want to follow a path, and I know I want to grow into certain directions, the corporate sounds better.
Yeah.
I have noticed that people that is not so proactive and is more like cautious and want to be given more like, you do this, you do that, you will grow into this direction, go to corporate. It's going to be awesome for you.
Do you think that if you go to a really corporate organization, loads of overheads, huge consultancy, for example, for your first job, do you think you pick up bad habits as a software engineer if you was to then move on?
But you pick bad habits in both. It's a matter of what bad habit you are going to take. Being in both places, in my case, finding the balance is really difficult. Because you, at the end of the day, like to make it like really holistic, you need to decide if you are going to bring business value by committing your tech excellency, or be the engineer you want to be, but delay the business value.
Yeah.
Everything in life is balanced. So it's not simple, but both are right.
Yeah.
The thing is how you make that balance happen.
Absolutely. I think, again, going back onto your answer, it depends. I know it's very vague, but it's very, very true in this case, right? And also with a startup, what defines a startup? It could be a company that, for me, I think it's a company less than 5 years. For some people, they base it off of cash flow and revenue and their product and whatnot. I always think that actually, again, this is my opinion. I'm sure maybe you've got a different one here, but if you're starting out in software engineering and you're looking for your first job, try and look for a company that has an established product, is already in the market, they have a solid client base, and maybe 5+ years, but maybe not too big. So it's still a startup, but a little bit more established. And perhaps you've got a team of around 10 engineers. I always think that that's quite a nice balance, because you can learn from people in the team, but you've not got the overhead. So you're going to accelerate that learning as well and the growth for the first 2 years. And then you're probably going to know a lot more than most software engineers will, who are maybe 4 or 5 years experienced. But again, go on, please.
I like the approach. I would like to add that from being an insider, my extra recommendation would be try to look if how solid and mature is the onboarding process.
True.
When you are a junior, you don't know what you are doing.
No.
Let's be honest. You have no idea. You need someone to tell you, or you need to make mistakes, and you need someone to guide you. you do a bootcamp, they teach you how to deliver something, but they don't teach you like design patterns, a lot of conceptual things. When you do the more like academic career, you learn a lot of the academics, but you lack some experience doing real projects that you may be learning in the bootcamp. So you need someone that guides you during your first year. And if the company has the right structure for those onboardings, and my opinion is that the first month, 2 months, maybe most 3 months of the junior is just onboarding. You need to teach that person company culture. What does it mean for that company to be an engineer? What do they value? And it's going to start to slowly form that professional person concepts.
Yeah.
That then are going to be your good habits and bad habits.
It's your foundations for how you integrate in the team. Yeah.
So,
and potentially your career.
And that can actually happen in both things, like startup or corporate. Different approaches, obviously, but the onboarding process, like how much they care, like giving you a coach, someone working with you the first 1 to 3 months and actually teaching you and not just tossing you tickets. Like you need to do this, you need to do that. For me, that's the real key.
How do you, by the way, because every hiring manager during an interview is always going to say how great the team is, how great the product is, and also how great the onboarding is. But how, from a candidate perspective, if you're applying for the role as a software engineer, how do you understand if the onboarding process is going to be successful? How do you how do you gauge that during the interview process? Because that can be super tough, right?
Extremely. And now, after many years and many interviews and many changes, I have my template of questions. But as a senior/manager, if I need to give an advice to a junior, I can't. I don't believe, like, they are trying to figure out what does it mean. So at the same time, trying to figure out what does it mean being an engineer and asking to see if they have the good practices, like, it's too much. What I believe is that you and hiring agencies can get a better idea and can understand, like, okay, this person really seems to love engineering and want to grow. I would recommend these companies that I know they have a good onboarding process, because you can have more conversations with the companies that you work with, and you can really see if there's a process. The candidate it's just a 30-40 minute meeting, and then you are in or you're out. So honestly, I think that the setup is like the market is not ready to provide that level of visibility and maturity.
No. I think what I always say is, if anyone's got any problems at all, so a candidate who's applying for a role and they've got some questions about culture or the onboarding process, because if you ask, like I say, every time the default answer will always be, it's great, right? You know, from the founders, they're always going to say that the company's the best company ever. And so I always say the best way to find out is to just talk to the people. You know, try and look through LinkedIn. It's such a great tool, not only for, you know, finding the jobs, but also connecting with people that are working at the jobs that you could be there, right? And trying to look and see who's just recently joined and understand their experience from their perspective.
Actually, you made me remember a cliche question that I have, that it's not going to work at first, but if you repeat it, you will start seeing a pattern.
Yeah.
I love to ask every person that interview me, if I give you the magic wand, what would be the thing that you will change right away? And what would be the thing that you are extremely happy and amazed that happens every day? Like the usual good and bad thing, but in a really like more flexible and tricky way. And if people start like giving a reading of the playbook, red flag to me. If people actually mention real things that happens and looks honest, they change their tone, they change their they approach. They seem to be thinking, and they need to mention a problem. Every company has a problem. That's a lie. It doesn't exist the perfect company, and it won't, and that's fine. And that's why engineers have work. We solve problems.
Yeah. Also, if a company doesn't, admit to their problems, not only is of course that a red flag because they're lying, right? Every company has problems, like you said, but also it's boring. You're a software engineer. You're supposed to be. You're technically you're problem solvers. You solve problems code that you write and the features that you add to the product and the development that you have with the product along the way. So to be a part of a team where you've got not really a lot of work and because everything's so perfect, actually that's super boring. It's not engaging at all and not good for development, for your personal development. In terms of meta now, because something just recently come up, and I'm sure you're probably aware potentially of this statement that Mark Zuckerberg said, but I think it was really interesting, especially for me, who's involved in software development. I think, of course, definitely for yourself as well. Mark Zuckerberg, he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, second most popular podcast in the world behind eur-hired, of course. So he was on there around about a week ago, and he made a very bold statement, and he said that pretty much mid-level software engineers will pretty much be replaced by AI, was his statement this year as well. What are your thoughts on that as somebody who's been in the software engineering game for quite some time now?
That's the first thing I need to say is that's tricky. It's a really yellow statement coming from a C-level person that they need to do those statements. They are catchy. They attract attention. They give the investors the feeling that they are going to revolutionize the world again. So it's a tricky statement that if I need to analyze the reality of the market as I see it, I don't completely buy it. I believe that AI is still way too green in that matter to replace a mid-level engineer. Why? Have you ever tried to ask ChatGPT or any AI hey, give me the solution for this, and they give you something and you say no, you're wrong? It always answers with, oh, you're right, let me fix it. And if you keep repeating that process that you're wrong, it's going to iterate over the same solution again and again and again. It's going to give you 7 solutions. So if you challenge it enough, you will get 10 contradictory solutions. So it's not ready. Maybe it's ready in 5-10 years, could be. I don't want to make a strong prediction like that, but the source of truth for coding, I saw some studies and numbers that actually 10% of the actual code that you see all over the world, Stack Overflow, Reddit, on places, is quality code. So we are trusting on a machine learning model that takes 90% of wrong code or wrong things. It's going to be wrong. You still need a person that differentiates what is wrong, right and wrong. What I do believe about that statement is that people that only go grabs a piece of code, copy paste, and then deliver a feature, that is going to be replaced for sure. An AI can do it better and doesn't have that doesn't get it wrong when you say, oh, you screwed up. If you say to a person you screw up 3 times in a row, it's going to cry. AI doesn't cry.
No, I think it's a really interesting point what you said about, when you say to correct it and then it would just keep doing the same thing and the same thing and there's no emotion, of course. I guess, again, this is more just thinking out loud here, but Mark Zuckerberg, he's a controversial person, but he's very well connected, right? He's a smart guy and he's been, at the forefront of tech for 20 years now, ever since Facebook.com was created. And oftentimes when he makes these predictions, he's often correct. And he's clearly got some really good oversights, right? what would be your advice to maybe junior engineers? Because if I was a junior engineer, by the way, I would probably start to look for a new career. You know, I
Nah,
would probably start, but do you think it gets to that point? Because if he is correct, that does mean that they are going to struggle to find jobs.
I mean, people is currently struggling to get jobs in the market.
True.
So I need to do a quick recap of what I see in history. Even before AI, there were too many job postings with, I need a junior engineer, but with 2-3 years of experience. No, that's not a junior, that's a semi-senior. You are looking wrong. It's wrongly defined, and it keeps being wrongly defined. So the barrier for starting in the industry was already leveraged. What this is doing is just adding an extra factor, in my opinion, and my recommendation is don't get into the business just because it brings you money. It's going to be more difficult. The easy money, that's the part that is going to be finished. You really need to like what you do. You really need to be interested into the topic. If you are actually like interested and or passionate, keep going. I think that there is a lot of future and more things to do. AI is only going to be improved if you have more engineers. So, and there is another truth that actually to make AI replace engineers, you will need stakeholders and people to actually know what to ask.
Yeah.
The statement that user doesn't know what they want has been even before I was born. So that's still going to be the case. It's not going to be replaced. It's going to be reduced and more focused. Like the concept of excellency and high performance is going to be more important, in my opinion. And there will be more specialization.
Interesting. Yeah, because I spoke to somebody last year actually, and they were really well connected and fascinated by AI. I think they worked within ML for around sort of 10 years. And they had some really cool insights. They kind of compared AI almost to the revolution of cars, when cars started almost replacing the horse and carriage. And he actually said that, again, it was a great analogy because it was so simplistic and everyone can relate to it. You don't have to be an expert to understand it. It was like, you know, a lot of people, when they had a horse and carriage and these big giant metal things on wheels started getting sold, they really feared for their job. And they was like, oh my God, they're going to replace us. When actually what it did was it created even more jobs, but it was just different. And I found that super interesting. And he kind of related that to AI and said, actually, you know, you shouldn't fear AI. You should kind of work with it. Don't work against it, because it could be beneficial if you work alongside it. You know, accept the change. And that's how you're going to be a great software engineer in the next sort of 10 years, as so much happens. And I was like, wow, you know, super powerful.
I completely agree, and maybe you go into engineering and you don't end up being an engineer, but you actually learn how to properly use AI and properly use some things, and you can pivot or transform and create new opportunities. Being a business owner with really strong technical background, and you really know how to use AI, so you can produce more. Like, I see it as an enabler, but as you say, like, people get scared of changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our initial instinct in our brain is to reject change. Even though we're in the business of technology, we always want to reject it. And I think if we'd done that, we wouldn't be progressing as fast as what we are. So I think with AI, you know, it's definitely in the wrong hands. I think, like everything, AI could be dangerous, right? There's always risks involved, but actually I think it's definitely something to embrace. It's exciting, you know?
As usual, like, people previously said that machines were dangerous when industrial revolution happened, and here we are.
We're still alive. We're just there. But look, I've just looked down at the time. I think it's just nearly getting to 30 minutes now that we've been here. So I wanted to just sort of wrap this up. But Federico, it's been such a fascinating conversation with you. Thank you so much for taking time to come on today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I really enjoyed it too.